Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, in our ongoing study in the book of Revelation by the Apostle John. We're going to take a look at our second lesson in chapter 18. It'll be 18:9 through 16. And we're going to get a good look at the character of New Babylon, the character of Rome, the New Babylon. It'll be basically threefold. It'll be egoism, greed, and idolatry. Rome was being judged for egoism, greed, and idolatry. So we'll take a look at block 1 first. We'll take a look at verses 9 through 11. We read in verse 9, "And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived in luxury with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they see her smoke and burning." In the Greek it reads, "They will weep and mourn." We cross-reference Jeremiah 51. "Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed. Wail for her." And Ezekiel 27:33. "You did enrich the kings of the earth of thy merchandise." Allegiance with Caesar was essential for maintaining economic trade with Rome. For cross-reference Isaiah 34, "The dust shall be turned to brimstone, the land to burning pitch." Smoke and burning are always metaphors for final judgment in Scripture. Now in verse 10 we read, "Standing afar off for fear of her torment, saying, Alas, the great Babylon, in 1 hour her judgment has come." And it does read fear of the torment in the Greek. They are standing at a distance. Babylon's loss means loss of economic riches to other kings of the earth. And its suddenness of judgment is that which inspires the reaction, because they also lament their own imminent participation in that same final judgment, says Beale. And we can look at Ezekiel 26:16, the judgment of Tyre, which is Babylon. "All the princes shall come down from their thrones, lay away their robes, and clothe themselves with trembling, and be appalled at thee." And then in verse 11, "And the merchants shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buys their merchandise any more." Babylon had become the primary consumer of goods. They mourn their own loss of economy. And to point that out, some scribes even wrote this: they mourn over themselves. It's all about loss of economic riches. No one really mourns for Babylon. They mourn for their own egoistic desires. They mourn over loss of wealth, loss of trade. There's no real mourning over Babylon. It's mourning over an egoistic loss of riches. And Babylon, or New Babylon, Rome, is guilty of the same egoism as we're going to see in block 2. We look at verses 12 through 14, and basically it just is a list of the goods and then a commentary on what's behind this lust for merchandise. In verses 12 and 13, we have the merchandise of verse 12: gold, silver, precious stones, pearls, linen, silk, scarlet, wood, ivory, bronze, iron, and marble. We have the merchandise of verse 13: cinnamon, incense, ointments, frankincense, wine, oil, flour, wheat, cattle, sheep, horses, chariots, slaves, and, because slaves, souls of men. Then we get our commentary in verse 14. "And the fruits that your soul lusted after are departed from you, and all the things of luxury are departed from you. You will find them no more. They are not to be found any more." The destruction of Babylon includes the destruction of goods that Babylon had acquired. And what Babylon, or New Babylon, Rome, really sought was ta lampras, bright things, temporal, finite, bright things. They sought false glory. They lusted after false things. They lusted after finite, bright things. And it is a lust of the soul. It is, in the Greek, lust of the soul that was behind Babylon's idolatry. So egoism depicts their character in block 1, and the lust of the soul after the temporal bright things of false glory is the second character trait in block 2. Now let's move on to block 3 and take a look at how this ends, because it's going to end in judgment and leaving New Babylon, Rome, barren. Let's take a look at 15 and 16. In 15 we read, "The merchants of these things, who were made rich by her, shall stand afar off, for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing." This is the repeated phrase we already had. It emphasizes the devastating judgment that will take place on Rome, on New Babylon. And then in 16 and 17a we read, "And saying, Alas, alas, the great city that was clothed in linen, and purple, and scarlet, and gold, and stones, and pearls, in 1 hour all comes to nothing." And the verb here is eremao. It means to bring to desolation, from eremos, wilderness. Rome's going to be brought to absolute barrenness through judgment, just as the historical Babylon was brought to absolute destruction and barrenness. We cross-reference Ezekiel 27:24, the lament over Tyre. "These were your merchants in all sorts of things, and chests of rich apparel." The merchants also perceive their own imminent judgment in this revelation. John says Rome shall be brought down, and all that Rome has acquired shall be brought to absolute wilderness, absolute barrenness. But really the lesson describes the character of the Roman Empire. What was really behind the Roman Empire? And it was block 1, egoism, block 2, greed, block 3, idolatry. Egoism, greed, and idolatry define the Roman Empire in Asia Minor. Domitian was egoistic. He demanded to be called Lord and Master and God, and he demanded to be worshipped. And like every emperor, he was greedy. He wanted riches and expected the riches of being an emperor. He was depicted as one who possessed a lust of the soul for temporal things. But that egoism and that greed is going to be judged, because idolatry will be judged, and idolatry will end in absolute barrenness in block 3. So egoism, greed, and idolatry depict the character of Rome. Egoism, greed, and idolatry. And John says it shall be judged as Tyre was judged historically. Rome shall be judged in the end of days. Remember, for John, the resurrection of Jesus Christ inaugurated the end of days. He believed that everything was coming to pass in his lifetime or the very next generation. He believed he was living in the end of days. Wouldn't you, if you just had witnessed the resurrection of the Messiah? After that miracle, after that transcendent event, John believed he was living in the end of days, and he believed that Christ would conquer, the slain lamb would conquer Rome, and that the church, the new Israel, the new Jerusalem, the church, would be delivered by Jesus Christ in final judgment. So he sees Rome actually as characterized by egoism, greed, and idolatry, and they shall be brought to absolute barrenness, absolute wilderness. Even though he's been exiled to a isle-like wilderness, he perceives that shall be overturned, and Rome shall be brought to absolute barren wilderness. To eremos, wilderness. To eremos, desolation. But the lesson, even though it is about the mourning of the earth dwellers who had become rich through Rome, there's no real love for Rome. There's love for self, and it's love for the riches gained through trade. And Ephesus was the headquarters for the trade routes. Asia Minor was a wealthy province for Rome because it was a center of the trade routes. And so all of that trade brought great wealth to Rome, and Rome therefore wanted Asia Minor to be severely in subjection to Rome. And for Domitian that meant, I should be worshipped as God on earth. But it was all because of a lust and a greed for bright things. Finite, bright things is the way it reads in the Greek. Bright things. And that lust, that desire, is a false glory, in contrast for what John knows as the true glory of God, and that is Jesus Christ coming in doxa glory to rescue and deliver the saints in New Exodus. The theme of Revelation is New Exodus. We know that through all of our previous lessons. Jesus Christ will come in doxa glory, deliver the saints in New Exodus, and the other side of that two-edged sword will be judgment against any evil kingdom in the end of days. In John's time, it is Rome, who is egoistic, greedy, and idolatrous. So we do get great additional insight into a lesson that was basically just supposed to be about the mourning of the loss of Babylon, but it really is all about the self-centeredness that's behind all of this. It really is all about ego, Domitian's ego, Pliny, and the provincial council, and his ego, and the wealth of the trade routes in Asia Minor that create that lust of the soul, a lust for false glory, for finite things, for manufactured and trade goods, not for the glory of God, a lust for finite, bright things. And for John, this is the end of days. And the end of days is about judgment and redemption and wrath. It's judgment that comes in a positive way for believers because that is redemption. It is judgment in a negative way for anti-Christ type people because it is wrath. It's a two-edged judgment coming in redemption and wrath. Redemption for the saints, bowls of wrath for evil kingdoms and evil empires and those who persecute the church. So it gives us the middle lesson. Basically, chapter 18, I've divided it into three 8 verse parts. There's 24 verses in chapter 18. We've covered 16 verses. The next lesson will wrap up chapter 18. But the middle lesson was all about supposed mourning the loss of Babylon. And we found out that there's no real mourning for Babylon. There's despair over loss of economy and the awareness that that judgment is coming in an imminent way for all who have opposed Christ. So we're going to pick up next time in the third section of chapter 18, beginning at 18:17 through verse 24.